Welcome to the podcast series, Irish by the Grace of God. And here's your host, Tony Gormley.
Great news, everybody. Irish by the Grace of God have now got a badly needed sponsor. GetDigs.ie are an Irish company that specialise in rental accommodation on a Monday to Friday basis. And homeowners can rent out a room in their home for part of the week and still avail of the government's rent a room scheme and earn up to 14,000 per annum tax-free. That's 14 grand. That's a serious incentive. They also have a presence in the UK with getdigs.co.uk, and their homeowners can earn up to £7,500 sterling per annum tax-free for renting out a room. And now they're also launching in the USA with a website called 5sleeps.com. That's the number 5 followed by sleeps.com, 5sleeps.com. So check out the websites for more details and make contact with them. So today's guest, everybody, on Irish by the Grace of God is an old friend of mine from Drogheda, Mike Kinsella. Did I call you Mike or did I call you Mick?
They call me Mick, but in work they call me Mike because they all got very embarrassed about calling an Irish guy Mick.
I was thinking,
yeah. And so people call me Mike. People still call me Kins, believe it or not, when I get back to Drogheda.
Yeah.
It's from being 15 years of age or whatever. I quite prefer Kins, to be honest with you.
Jeez. But I know Kins from, I'd say 40 years ago. I spent my last 2 years of secondary school in CBS. Jesus, what was the name of the
St. Mary's, yeah.
St. Mary's in Drogheda, and had a good time. I was taken out of boarding school, and my last 2 years were in Drogheda, so that I could focus on my studies. That didn't happen. But so I met Mike there, and I think we became good friends.
Yeah.
We went to college then.
Yeah.
And we kind of went our separate ways then. And it's 40 years, I'd say, since we've seen each other. So I maybe try and get through your history. Maybe quick overview of you growing up in Ireland and, primary school, secondary school, etc.
Yeah. So way back, I was actually born in Manchester, but I only stayed there 6 weeks. Around the corner from where the Smiths kind of had their famous album cover or single cover, I think, the Working Men's Club. But my dad was working over there. They came back when they had me, so I didn't get any of the flat vowels. 6 weeks, and then kind of like brought up in Drogheda. So we eventually moved to Ballsgrove, which I don't know whether you remember that, Tony. But
I do, yeah.
Kind of a massive big house. And say quite a lot of us kind of came from there that were at St. Mary's. I'd done 2 schools. I went to St. Joseph's on the north side of the town for primary, and then I flipped over to St. Mary's. And the only reason it wasn't St. Joseph's probably academically better, I think. But the reason why I flipped was because we had a gym on the south side, St. Mary's. So that was the thinking behind it, and kind of spent a lot of time in that gym over the years, kind of playing basketball with Brother Grogan and all that side of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I guess at that point played a lot of Gaelic and a lot of soccer ball, and did karate. Spent a lot of time. Strangely enough, when people that know me now, Tony, find it very difficult to equate me with sports at all, because I kind of give it a total blank these days. I switch off the World Cup. I'm not interested in Celtic or Rangers. It's so people do kind of look at me like I'm a bit odd, particularly in Glasgow, where it's in the water basically. But yeah, once music began to come into my life, and I guess kind of guitar playing and songwriting and stuff, that took over. That kind of wiped out any real interest in Man U or any of the other Premiership teams that were all rife at that moment in time, I guess, and still are in Ireland. Not so much here in Glasgow. It tends to be Scottish kind of league. But yeah, so in terms of schooling, that's my kind of background.
Yeah. I always remember you as being one of those guys that was good at everything. Yeah, I remember I'll tell you a story about your karate maybe later on. But my first actually introduction to you was we were going in a school. I was the new Limerick dude who came into the college or into the school, and I was chatting to you. We were going on a school tour, and you said to me, "Go over and ask McNamee there about how good his sister is at dancing."
No way! Oh no! Oh no!
So I went over and I says, "Brendan, I hear your sister is a great dancer," and he goes, "You bastard! She's in a wheelchair." Of course, it was a setup. It was a setup. So I went off with a big red head in me. So that was my first introduction.
Oh, Christ almighty, that's not a good start. I mean, I knew I'd done that once or twice. I had no idea I did it to you, Tommy, that you were on the receiving end.
Oh, I remember.
Oh, but we were just up for the crack.
Yeah.
99% of the time, it was all just about having a laugh, wasn't it?
It was great.
There was no subject really kind of off limits, including your sister being a ballerina in a wheelchair, just to welcome you into the fray.
Yeah, but they were good. No, but I recall that you were very good academically. You were great at the basketball and the soccer and the karate as well. So I mean, you were pretty. And of course, the music then came in. A left-handed guitarist, that really took my attention, and you were big into Deep Purple then at the time.
Yeah. I guess at that kind of point where the music was coming in, it was all kind of Fender Stratocasters, and for me, Deep Purple was Richie Blackmore, basically, you know.
Yeah.
And but of course, Rory was in the mix, which is something I immediately kind of bonded with you over, because you always had the best Rory played shorts and did the best impression of Rory or Joey Mars, and I thought that guy can do it. All he needs is a guitar placed in his hands. But yeah, so it was Stratocasters, and that kind of got me into that side of it. In reality, at that point, you'll remember yourself, like we were listening to everything from Bob Dylan and Neil Young to Bob Marley, and we listened to a lot of rock music. I listened to a lot of rock music because I was into guitar, and I was into kind of lead guitar. And in a way, I didn't listen to a lot of it for relaxation or whatever, you know what I mean? Deep Purple, yeah, we, definitely, at 15, 16, that was a big thing. But I was always more aligned with songs and songwriters and kind of the Beatles or Lennon, McCartney, or, where there were tunes, basically,
sure.
as opposed to 20-minute guitar solos. Although I like the 20-minute guitar solo, it depends who's playing it.
Yeah.
And it's great to see Rory get, I guess with YouTube and access to all this stuff now, you can really set up your own little bubble. And I kind of went on a Rory trip there about 3 months ago, with various people talking about his playing and being influenced and all the rest. And he's just a big name amongst guitar players, which I didn't really appreciate at the time. I know you appreciated it, and your brother Jer, was it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, you guys had it down to pat. We were kind of catching up in Drogheda, I think. We were all, which is why we probably latched onto you, Tony, because we thought, here's a man from the big city. He knows what's going on here.
He thinks he knows what he's talking about.
You look like you knew what you were doing. With an air guitar, you definitely look like you'd just come back from the European tour. So.
But yeah, you see now people like Slash and Brian May and all that talking about Rory, which, you know, massive
Incredible.
esteem. Yeah.
Yeah, and even those guys talking about the fact he was using an old Vox AC30 amplifier
That's right, yeah.
that he had. The only thing he had plugged into it was a treble boost, which was the same thing, believe it or not, that Blackmore had plugged into his kind of setup too. It was fairly low-fi in terms of effects pedals and that side. You know, they were literally plugging into the amp and overdriving the valves, and that was it.
Yeah. I think, if I recall correctly, did you play a gig in the gym in the school?
I
think you might have.
I did a Christmas thing.
Yeah.
I played with Big David McLaughlin. Do you remember Dave McLaughlin?
Dave, yeah.
And that was a funny one because he was quite an accomplished kind of acousticy guy, and he wanted to play Lion Eyes by the Eagles, which wasn't really up my street. But I thought, yeah, you do a verse, I'll do a verse. So because I didn't know the song, I wrote it on a little piece of paper and I stuck it on the neck of the acoustic guitar. But I wrote it in blue biro, and when the lights come on, the blue lights come on, it just looked like a blank piece of paper. So I basically made up the second and fourth verses of Lion Eye in front of everybody that I knew and loved in Drogheda sitting in the gym. Not my best moment.
Very good. So when you finished school, you went to, and as I did, we went to what it was called at the RTC in Dundalk. Yeah. It's called something different now, the Technological Institution. But we both did electronics. We weren't in the same class. You were in the good class, and I wasn't in the good class.
Well, but I think it was split, wasn't it? The one of the classes was a kind of like a hardwired 3-year diploma course, and the other one was kind of split into a certificate, and then you went and did a diploma. And the focus of the one that I went on was research and development or design, which is kind of what led me over here, etc. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But so yeah, I mean, I don't know about you at that point, Tony, but when I came out of school, I kind of had ideas that I wanted to go and study English, and I wanted to do this, that, and the other, even though I was good at science, and I could see that that's where the work was. And there was a lot of pressure at that point, just with the economy being the way it was, you know, in the early 80s, that the idea of swanning off to Trinity and doing a degree in English Lit, and then, you know, spending the rest of your life staring into the mid-distance and scratching your chin and writing a shitty version of Ulysses probably wasn't going to get the beans on the table. So I went and I did it just like you did in electronics, but I can't say I loved electronics, even though I quite liked physics. It just wasn't floating my boat, but I stuck with it and went through the whole lot. And then kind of always had an idea that I would come out and try and maybe get into computing and from that side of things, you know. But yeah, I was a bit of a reluctant third level student at the regional, as we would have called it.
Yeah.
I thumbed it up and down every day, most days.
I did the same.
Yeah. Did you? Yeah. Of course you, because I'd pass you on that. Yeah.
Do you remember the time we hitched from Dundalk to Drogheda with road cones on our head? Or bringing glass, you know, painted glass across the road.
Yes, we'd normally get dumped out and done later or something, and we'd have to kind of stand on that brow of the hill as it kind of headed up with fake panes of glass being carried across. I mean, if you did that stuff now, you would get arrested, I'm sure.
Yes, you would.
Yeah, or somebody would film you on their iPhone, and before you know it, you'd either be in an internet sensation or you'd be in the barracks and Drogheda.
Oh yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
So did you enjoy your time in the The RTC.
I didn't really, to be honest. Because of time and because I delayed it, Tony, I was kind of half thinking of doing English, either in UCD or in Trinity, but there was nobody around me, and probably pretty much the same as yourself. Maybe your older brother Jer, he was doing accountancy, wasn't he?
He was, yeah.
There was nobody around me that had, any university experience. There was nobody saying, "Hey, that's a good idea. You should go and spend 4 years of your life reading books. You might get a job. You might not." Everything was hardwired towards, not in any bad way. It was just kind of like, practically, it was almost a stretch for people in my circle that you were going to go and spend 3 years not earning and being in studying electronics, even though you were going to come out and get a decent job at the end of it. So I kind of left it late to apply for Dundalk. And then when I did, there had been a grant system related to this course that I was too late applying for. So I literally did 3 years with a red cent from the government or whatever. So hence the reason why I was playing in bands and working in bars and all the rest of it was just because there was no grant. So that was a bit tough, because everyone else in my class, and probably in yours, they would head off and get their 28 quid or whatever it was at the end of the week. And I was like, "Nah, mate, you're doing it for free."
Yeah. I didn't get the grant either, but so you had to work, basically.
Yeah. And I think, I didn't get the grant. When I did try and go for it, whatever way my father's wages were and all the rest, I wasn't eligible. The only people that seemed to be eligible were farmers who had 100,000 acres of land somewhere, that only earned £600 a year from their wheat fields and spuds. So nothing's changed. It's probably exactly the same. If you were a PAYE worker, there was no chance of getting the grant.
So you finished your 3 years, and what happened then?
I came out. We went. Did you come to work in Technicon? Were you in Technicon too?
No.
So there was a factory that made blood analysis equipment, really, really kind of seriously high end blood analysis technology. They were called Technicon. They got bought by L'Oreal, or one of the big pharmaceutical companies, but they were in Swords.
Right.
So a lot of us came out, and somebody got us in there, and so we were working as, I guess, test technicians.
Right.
So they were building these huge, big systems. So really, pretty much a matter of life and death whether whether the information coming out of them was correct or not. Like your blood analysis.
Yeah.
It was pretty kind of critical. You didn't get somebody else's analysis, that type of thing. So these things were big systems and kind of motherboards, multi-processors and all the rest. So we did that for a while, and then I realized that I'd been kind of sold a pup by I guess the regional and the Irish government, that there didn't seem to be any research and development and design in Ireland. We really had, I guess, what would be called board shops, where computers were assembled or technology was assembled, but nobody was really designing it. Nobody was in a lab trying to work out how to build it, and that's kind of what I convinced myself I should do, because that's what the course was about. So I applied for a job in Scotland, and it came back. It was in the military of defence, and it came back positive, but in lieu, or a caveat of having security clearance. So coming from the Republic of Ireland into the military of defence, top secret project, probably wasn't the best time. Seeing as the hunger strikers were all kind of
that's right, yeah.
It was that time.
Yeah.
And so in the middle of that, Tony, I got offered, believe it or not, on the complete other side of the tracks, to go to the Garda engineering. So
whoa.
All right, I've got a cunning plan here. I'll take the Garda engineering job, And then I'll tell the crowd in Glasgow, hey, by the way, security clearance, I'm a fully paid up Garda Síochána member. So that did work, right? But unfortunately, it delayed that long in getting back to me. I spent 3 months in Templemore in, the Garda training bag, which was like basically been in the army for 3 months. And you'll remember me as I remember you from that period of time. We were kind of like long-haired rockers with a large bit of hippie in our DNA and a bit of punk rock thrown in for good measure. So the idea of marching around Templemore for 3 months with the Dib Dib Dob Dob Brigade was a bit of a sore one. But when I actually resigned from it, I was still in Templemore. So I got the letter through from Baron Stroud here in Glasgow. And I went up and I said, hey guys, I've had enough of this nonsense. I'm out, I'm gone, packing my bag. I'll be leaving tonight on the next train out of Templemore. And of course it was, wait a minute, you can't just walk out of here. This is daddy. I says, I'm fucking going. And he says, no, but you'll need to resign and you'll need to sign the papers and you'll need to whatever. And I says, well, get me the papers. And so, so they couldn't find any papers because nobody had ever resigned in the history of the Irish state from Templemore barracks. It's like most people would give their right arm to get in there, a certain type.
Another first for Mike Kinsella.
You know what I mean? Told the Garda to fuck off with themselves. They didn't have the paperwork, so they had to let me go. And to be fair, they put me through a little bit of a rigmarole the next day down on the Marching Square and all the rest of it. They thought it was hilariously funny. I thought it was humiliating. But so that was it. I got out of there, got out of Dodge, and went to Scotland. And it turned out that the military defence project I was working on was basically Trident, the nuclear submarine. So
sorry, Mike, for interrupting. Let me get time frames here. So you would have left RTC, you would have left the college at what, 83?
83, yeah.
And then you went to work for a period of how many years?
I worked in Ireland up until September of 84.
Okay.
And I went to Scotland in September, October of 84.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
I've been here kind of ever since. I should say, I moved to Glasgow. When people kind of ask me about Scotland, and I've always just thought I've moved to Glasgow. I'm not that kind of connected with the rest, although it's a beautiful, beautiful country and has its own kind of ways. And I mean, I feel very comfortable in Glasgow, not necessarily in other kind of parts of it or whatever, which is strange,
I was going to say, why is that? Because look, my son was in Edinburgh last weekend, my daughter's going next weekend, but it's something they'd say, I'm not going, they wouldn't say, I'm going to go to Glasgow for the weekend unless it was for a match or something.
Yeah. It's quite because, I kind of got to know it really well by playing in bands and touring around Scotland and being in all. So I know Scotland well, and I know it's the vibe in various different places, etc. And where the rock and roll towns are, where the dance towns are, and that type of thing. So I mean, Edinburgh's just picture postcards. It's the Athens of the North and all the rest. It's very pretty. But you wouldn't get me. I couldn't spend 3 hours in Edinburgh without trying to get out of it on the train. It doesn't. The cultural kind of aspect of it is essentially. I mean, they'll shoot me down in flames if anyone ever sees this, but they basically import it for a month. They have the world's largest arts festival, and everybody goes into it and plays it. They're not from Edinburgh. If you go to Edinburgh in September, I'm not sure what's going on, who's doing anything. But if you go there in August, every comedian, every player, every writer, every author will be in the city. Whereas Glasgow has a real kind of genuine, like Dublin, kind of, I guess, a working class music, tech, down to earth vibe. Plus, it's hilarious. I mean, Glasgow, you know what I mean? It's not an accident. It's produced Billy Connolly and Kevin Bridges and many more. And
Brilliant,
most of them live around here actually. But Frankie Boyle. But I mean, it's sensational, kind of like that. That's just in the water here a little bit, you know. People have always got something to say. People are always they've got the crack. I guess the other thing is, Tony, that there's a lot of people in Glasgow who are second and third generation Irish, you know, that came here from Donegal. You'll meet a lot of people that will say to you, you know, my granny's from Donegal. They're all from Donegal.
Yeah.
They're not from Cavan or Louth or Wicklow. And so that was kind of invisible to us, you know, or Limerick or Galway. They all seem to have emigrated from Donegal, probably turn of the last century.
Right.
And you're right. The problem with Glasgow is that the only reason people do find themselves in it is if they're Celtic fans or whatever. And they get in a bus from Drogheda and they arrive in the east end of Glasgow where the Celtic Stadium is, which is the equivalent of Beirut as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I think I've been down there twice for football matches. I mean, it's just a dangerous, horrible part of the city. It's like somebody dropping you into Ballymun in the late 70s, and then you coming back to report on what Dublin was like. You know, it's football fans tend to get in the stadium, are basically terrified by the local crappy bars, get back in the bus and come back to Ireland and have terrible tales of woe about how awful Glasgow is. But I mean, Glasgow's an incredibly civilized arts kind of like based city as well as everything else. And it's great because we don't have blow-ins. We don't have people just arriving in to hang out and fill the bars and restaurants.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You probably recall this, but myself and Regina, before we got married, this has gone back a long time, we went to Edinburgh for a weekend. No planning.
Yeah.
Actually, no, we went to Edinburgh for a week. No planning. We just arrived over and we found out it was the week of the Flower Festival. So we couldn't get any accommodation.
Right, okay.
So we had to queue for hours to get into a female hostel and a male hostel. So she got into the female, and then I went in and I was in a room with 10 other guys. And I woke up the next day and my shoes were gone. Right? So I said, I had to walk to the female hostel, which was about a mile up the road in my bare feet. So that was grand. Got her anyway, and I said, you have to buy me a pair of shoes. So she bought me a pair of shoes. And I said, all right, we're not staying here. What do we do? And I says, I know, there's a guy called Mike Kinsella. I went to school with him. I know he's in Glasgow. Have you a number for him? No. Anyway, long story short, we got your number. We rang you. You came from Glasgow to Edinburgh, picked us up in the car, and we spent a week in your apartment, and we had a blast. We were going to gigs every night.
Yeah. That's coming back to me now. Tony. That had been a complete blank with me. That's coming back. That is the type of city that my flat at the time, I guess, would have been in the city. So it would have been down beside the art school and onto Sauchiehall Street. So all of that was the main strip in Glasgow at the time, with pubs and clubs and bars and all the rest of it. It was just a brilliant place to.
Oh, it was brilliant. It was a brilliant week.
And I guess the thing is, you know, at that point in time, there were so many bands in the city that were all signed and on top of the pops, like the, I guess, kind of Delamitri and Orange Juice and the Blue Nile and Deacon Blue and all these kind of bands. They were all from the city, in the city, making music. So it was a very music city.
Yeah.
You know, everybody was either in a band or going to see a band, and I was doing both. So yeah, bloody hell, I had forgotten about that. That's incredible about your shoes, but Nick, though. That's kind of, do you know, it's the one thing I kind of say. You asked me about Glasgow and Scotland, why the difference? It's like, I don't think Scotland has the first idea how to do tourism, even though it's one of the most beautiful countries you've ever seen. I mean, you go 30 miles from this window here, you're at Loch Lomond, which is the equivalent of the lakes of Killarney. I mean, that's what it looks like. You know, you go from Glasgow to that in 30 minutes. And it would be nice to get a beer or a nice bite to eat, or, you know, stay somewhere that they didn't think, there's a famous quote in Scottish, well, a joke, in a Glaswegian joke. If you ever go to these places, as you arrive at the B&B, they'll say something to you like, yeah, you'll have had your dinner then. You know, as in, like, they're not going to be making that. And that should be that should be it. You know, never mind Kate Deal of Fortune, just you'll have had your dinner. Should be the strap line for Scottish tourism. And I don't think it's ever got any better. Me and Sue's very rarely holiday in Scotland. We try and get back to Ireland as much as possible, which we do.
Yeah. So how, if I recall, you were designing telescopes for submarines or something, was it?
Yeah, periscopes. So yeah, we were kind of working on this top secret submarine. As it turned out, it was Trident, but nobody knew about it when we worked there. We only all found out years after.
Sorry, I was just laughing. A telescope for a submarine. That's pretty uncool. I wouldn't like to be the fellow holding the telescope.
It's I'll tell you a quick funny story. I'll keep it very short, but the head of the Italian Navy, who even knew that they had a Navy, right? But he arrived over because he was looking at some of the tech we were building, and he wanted to kind of look at the behind the scenes, how we were doing this, that, and the other. So he came in and he was in the full Italian Navy gear, feathers in the hat and the whole bit. So we all had to be on best behavior. So he came in and we had this mock-up kind of built with all the electronics and screens and everything, but it was all kind of embedded into what could best be described as a telegraph pole, right? So this thing was like a big round piece of wood and lots of these things in it, and this mainframe computer that was running all the various bits and pieces. And he came in and he looked at it and he's kind of nodding, he's looking, and and apparently he went out, and in the meeting he had with the top guys afterwards, he said, yes, this is brilliant, this is just what I was expecting, but I want to stipulate that we want a metal one. I'm like, mate, it's a mock-up. If you put a telegraph pole in the water, it's probably not going to be the best kind of. I mean, you know what I mean. The head of the Italian Navy thinks that we're going to give him a wooden telescope, or a wooden periscope.
But yeah, very good. Go ahead anyway with your work there. So you were working with them for how long?
Worked with them for, I guess, about 2 or 3 years. I found out 2.5 years in, actually, I found out, I was beginning to get vibes that we were working on Trident submarine, which was not a very cool thing. We all knew what it was, and what it was basically the nuclear deterrent for the UK. So came out of there and ultimately kind of moved to compact computers, were taking on IBM at that point in time. This was before Dell and before a lot of the kind of mainstream computer manufacturers. So I went in to them to work in product and new product introduction. So I was very much aligned with whatever we were building right now, or what was coming down the line. I was introducing it. So this was a massive manufacturing facility of probably 3,000-4,000 people. So wow. It was a huge. I mean, at one point, I think we were pumping out 1 million computers a month. This thing was like a massive, just-in-time manufacturing operation, and so I had great fun there. While I was there, I kind of had my own band, and it gave me plenty of time to go and play and write and record, and the work side of it was really just it was paying the bills, I guess. You know, it was good work, and it was great experience. I met a lot of wonderful people there, including my wife, and Suze. And so, and again, the MD of that particular plant here in Glasgow, I brought him in a few years later when I started my own company. I brought him in as a non-exec director. So there were just good times. They were one of the first companies, I guess, Tony, that had that, like IBM or Xerox, or, you know, those West Coast San Francisco Valley type companies that had cultures that, you know, they looked after the people, they paid everybody well, they made sure everyone got free food, everyone, you know, it was kind of like where the Googles and the Facebooks got it all from. And Compaq was the first in this country that really embraced that whole kind of cultural view of how you treat your employees, which was great, because I kind of picked that up from there and kind of brought it with me. And it's something I've always had, you know, that I think keeping people at the center of what you're doing. If people are happy and people are kind of on it, then it's good times.
Yeah.
If you're trying to exploit people, or you're trying to get them to do things they don't want to do, it just doesn't end well. It might in the short term look like it's working, but I've never been a fan or an advocate of it. So yeah, I did about 10 years there.
Okay.
It was one of those. When I think back, well, what was I doing and what was I working on? It was the focus was always on music. The focus was recording albums, and the focus was going on tour with various, not big tours, but we did a kind of tours with Crowded House and World Party and Squeeze.
I didn't realize now that. So, did you release albums? You did?
Yeah. Well, we released. We had 3 EPs and then an album, and we got to the point with the album where we were kind of like a bit too old, or we thought we were too old at this point. We were 30, and we thought we'd kind of missed the first boat of Glasgow band getting signed to Warner Brothers and Sony and all the rest. They'd all left town and went to Manchester for the whole dance rave thing, and we were kind of left in Glasgow like the Marie Celeste, you know. Nobody, no record company people up there. There were a few bands got out that were in our kind of camp, like Travis. But very, very few. Maybe Teenage Fan Club through Creation and stuff like that. But that was all kind of indie label. But yeah, we had a heart set on getting a deal with a major, and that's kind of where we were focused. I mean,
what was the band's name?
The band was called the Color Wheel. We were called the Catherine Wheel, and some bunch of thieving bastards nicked it just as we were about to kind of like release things and all the rest of it. So yeah, we toured as the Color Wheel with I think we were the Color Wheel with Crowded House. But yeah, just great fun. You know, we got to support them playing the Barrowlands, and we played the Fla here in Glasgow, and just great times. You know, that type of thing. If you look up the Color Wheel on Spotify, the album's up there. I put it up about a year ago,
right?
With the express plan that I was going to do a little bit of marketing, and just like, not marketing, but let people know it was there that were into the band at the time. But I've never actually got round to telling anybody it's there. So it's all word of mouth. If I see somebody, I'll say, hey, by the way, you know, the album. Because I'm normally looking to buy a copy of it off me because we didn't release it. And I said, it's up there, it's free, so just fill your boots. On a complete opposite side of that coin, I met a guy in a pub about 3 months ago, and he came up to me and he said, you're Mick Kinsella, are you? And I was like, yeah. Do I owe you money? And he says, yeah, I used to come and see the Color Wheel, you know, at King Tut's Wawa Hut. And I says, all right, yeah. And he says, look, I've just put your album into, I was supposed to think this was great, but he's a curator for Glasgow Transport Museum, and they've got this whole mocked up old street, and there's a record store in it. And so he had put the he'd put the Colour Wheel CD kind of in the window of the shop, but lots and Simple Minds and all the rest of it. And I thought, that's really nice. But I seem to have went from playing in a band to being a museum exhibit without any of the fun of the middle bit.
God, yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
Well, you know, it's just one of those wee things. It was more funny and nice for my daughter Kira, who's 23, because I said to her, "Hey, you never guess whose album's in the window of the museum record shop."
Yeah.
And so she's been telling her pals, you know, "Hey, my dad's album's down there." So it's strange.
He's a relic.
Yeah,
but exactly. No, I never realized that. I knew you played, but I didn't realize that it was such a focus.
Yeah, it probably would have been later, Tony, because it would have probably been in late 80s into early 90s.
Wow.
Because I was 30 in 93, and we kind of just decided we'd had enough when all of a sudden Blur and Oasis started to do similar kind of like strand of 60s influenced music that we'd already been kind of like doing. But that whole Britpop scene wasn't anything I was particularly kind of into. I like Blur, and I love Radiohead, but they're not exactly kind of Britpop. Wasn't a fan of Oasis. And at that point, we just kind of went, right, okay. And I just continued on writing and playing with friends, basically, and just having, and to this day, still do that.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
it's a great, it's a great hobby to have. They say if you can play an instrument, you know, you have entertainment for life. I mean, I've been hacking away for the last 3 years.
You've got a Les Paul on the wall there, yeah? No,
it's not. That's an ornament.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Well, no, it's a guitar, but I can't use it. So like, you know, fair play to you. It's great to have.
It's always been central, you know. I guess I've always written, and all my friends here, most of them are in bands, and most of them are some at various different levels. Like possibly my best mate, Greg Kane, who's one half of Hue and Cry. He's a brilliant kind of like producer, kind of writer. As he well knows, I'm not a huge fan of Hue and Cry. I've got huge respect for them because of they're jazzers. They're jazz funk people. They really, really know their stuff. They're not just shang-a-lang and C, G and D, you know. But yeah, so it's always been there, and I'm glad of it, to be honest, because it's a thread through my life, you know.
Fantastic.
A house full of bloody left-handed guitars, but tripping across morning and night. But
I still think I could be a front man for a serious rock band.
Oh yeah, but you've got it. You've got it, yeah. You've got the AC/DC hat as well. So you've got all the major boxes ticked. Dude, I've seen you on the floor of Joey Mars and many school gymnasiums giving it your. I think you have got that frontman gene. Although I fronted bands, I don't think I've ever been that guy. I've never been that guy. That can just go out and absolutely lose themselves with gay abandon.
But so where are we now? What year you were in the computer in Compact for 10 years? What happened then? What was
what happened was the internet happened. So I was working with Compaq, and we were beginning to buy internet companies. They bought a company called Alta Vista, who were one of the 4 search engines, pre-Google and all the rest. And just at that point in time, Google began to kick in. So this is like 99, and my dad had just died.
Sorry to hear that.
Kira had been born, and they were looking for redundancies at Compaq, and I'd been trying to get out for a little bit. And I thought, I'm going to take redundancy and I'm going to start an internet company. That's what I'm going to do. So easier said than done, but that's what I did do. So I started a company that it was social media before Facebook and all these types of companies. It was all about connecting people together and circles of friends and that type of thing. But I started that and I raised a million quid in seed capital from a local entrepreneur in Glasgow, a guy called Richard Emmanuel. And we began to build the company up and build a product and put it out there. And it began to catch fire. And we got to about, I think we got to about 5 or 6 million users. Somebody's trying to get me here, Joe.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Take that in a minute. But yeah, took $1 million, invested it, grew it to about 5 or 6 million users, went out to the West Coast of America and raised more money to then grow the company. So we grew it to about 80 people, and we raised 25 million quid and ran it for about 15 years.
Wow, I didn't realize this.
Yeah, so the company, we had an office in London, here in Glasgow. Most of the dev and design was here in Glasgow. And we had an office in Boston. But where the wheels come off the bogey with it was the more the money came into the company, the more that the venture capital people began to just bring in idiots. Where they wanted to flip the company to Disney in America. So they were really focusing the company into the kind of what they would call the tween market. So pre-teens and girls. And so this whole thing was all just a bit of an anathema to me. So I stepped away from it and went out to kind of raise some more capital to build what was going to be, at that point in time, a recommendations engine for music. I'd already had some interest from some people, but just as I went to do that, I kind of thought that WeWorld will run itself. We've got enough people in there that are doing it. I'm still on the board, but I can go and do this. And this was 2008 at this point. So we all know what happened in 2008. Yeah. The entire world blew up, and there was no venture capital, there was no money, there was no whatever. So, and this was just around the time that Spotify were beginning to do things, or Apple Music were beginning. I don't know if Spotify were quite in the scene, but certainly Apple was. And I was looking to try and do something there, but it never came to fruition. I had the name of the company as well, was called Pet Revolver, which was a mixture of pet sound and revolver. At one point, I think we had the name God's Jukebox as well, which we owned the name on for a bit.
Set up a new business, a music type kind of.
Yeah, so I was looking to do a music recommendation engine, which is something that kind of goes, you listen to this stuff, you're probably like all this. But the difference with this was it was human. It was driven by real people whose maybe taste in music you respected, like the way we all found about music growing up, where somebody said, hey, if you like, Neil Young, you might like a bit of Jackson Browne, or you might like this, that, or the other, or Joni Mitchell. So the idea was to kind of like create a hive mind with lots of people whose opinions people would respect, people in bands or music or the industry, as opposed to what we've really got, which is getting a little bit better, I guess, but horrible algorithms that say, if you like Bob Dylan, you'll probably like Charles Aznavour because he's a guy as well. So so the plan was to try and avoid landing in that space, but we were in that particular hell for quite some time. So yeah, that was the plan, but just through circumstances out of our control, 2008 wasn't really the place to do that. And so I'd kind of written myself out of my own company a wee bit. They wanted to go in a certain direction. As I said, I wasn't really interested. It was focused on pre-teen girls in North America. I mean, we had about 250 million users. This thing was huge.
Yeah.
And this was before Facebook. This was bigger than Facebook. But these guys just basically drove the whole thing into a wall effectively, because really what they wanted was to flip the company to Disney and take a few $100 million off them or whatever. And that was never really going to work. I just didn't think that's where, for many reasons, I thought that had jeopardy for Disney. One was what we're hearing about all the time now with regards to Twitter, and that is just basically curating the content and mediating the content and making sure that people aren't saying that they want to blow up the Twin Towers or whatever's going on. And the only way you can really do that, you can write software, of course, to kind of check for various different things, but ultimately it requires people. And I remember at one point we had a mobile app and we put it onto Motorola phones in Europe. And it was going to go out onto something like 4 million handsets in Europe in multiple languages. And I got a phone call from the guy, the main product guy at Motorola. And he said, so how are you guys mediating all this? Now, how do you kind of like control it? And I thought, how are we controlling it? There's 20 of us. you're Mr. Motorola, who owns half of Chicago. It's like, surely you've got a few bums and seats of people that might be able to kind of monitor and control it. So I kind of recognized at very early doors that these huge megacorps didn't want to spend any money, resource, time in kind of managing the content contained therein. So I kind of seen the writing on the wall with the Disney thing, and it was a real pity because we were way ahead of the game, Tony. I mean, like way ahead of the game. Wow. And we had the investment, we had the technology, but we also had Muppets brought in by the venture capital team. So it's like, at the end of the day, it really just boils down to people and who the people are and how good their ideas are. And it's turned out that they hired a couple of Uber Muppets, and we never were ever really able to get back from that because we had to kind of traffic everything through them. If I say anything else than that, I might end up in prison or in the High Court. So so that's what that kind of landed. So when I came out of it, then Kira was about 9, and I'd done a lot of traveling, a lot of flying over and back across the Atlantic, a lot of time in Europe and trying to with networks and trying to sell into mobile phone manufacturers and internet companies. And so I eventually was just busted. I guess the phrase that's used now is burnt out. But on top of all that, I realized that my wee girl was growing up and I wasn't really around as much as I wanted to be. And so I just thought, you know what? My priority is really Kira and just making sure that as a family we're good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's only so much business, as I kind of said to you earlier on. Music's always been at the back of things for me, and the creative process and that side of it. Business and spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations and all the rest. Yeah, I've been there, done it like everybody else has done it. Do I enjoy it? Not particularly, but I can kind of get on with it and get it done. And so, the family, I guess, and making sure that Kira grew up to be a decent skin, as they say, was way more important to me at that point. To the point where last week I went to see Neil Young's movie about the making of Harvest. It's out at the moment. It got a limited cinema release last week. And she came along to it with me and basically sang all the words of Harvest all the way through. Wow. So it was a proud father.
Yeah.
But she was the youngest one in there by about, I'd say, 30 years anyway. But
None of mine would come to a Neil Young film. I can tell you that for nothing.
Well, she was kind of hoodwinked into it a little bit because I initially bought it for Suze, and Suze's exact quote to me was that the fella that we went to see at the Scottish Exhibition Centre and he did 20-minute solos? And I went, yeah. And she says, I'm not going. I've got pottery classes on that night. So this was his pre-guitar solo noodling phase. But you probably remember, do you not? Like Sean Conlon, or Alvin, as we would have called him in St. Mary's.
Yeah.
He got us all into Neil Young, like early doors.
Yeah.
And he brought in Rust Never Sleeps. And you remember the photocopiers that used to photocopy handouts that smelt of alcohol?
Yeah.
You know, pink writing. Well, we were supposed to be doing the fall of the Roman Empire, but he would bring in the lyrics to the Thrasher and Pocahontas and all these tracks from Rust Never Sleeps, and we would review the lyrics. What that had to do with Latin, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I think he's kids play as well himself. Yeah.
I go back home quite a bit, Tony. So I've got a mobile home down in Clotterhead. Do you know Clotter down on the coast?
I worked in a fish factory in Clotterhead for one summer.
Did you?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, you're legendary. That place is
wasn't pleasant. I remember when we'd arrive home, we'd have to undress in the boiler house out the back, go straight into the shower, and even after the shower, you can still get the smell.
I know it's. I think it's. I don't know if it's still there or whether it does the processing anymore. I think the trawlers now process it out at sea and freeze it, and then I'm not sure what goes on at there is a factory there, and it will be the factory that you were in, just on the way down to the harbour.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I go back quite a bit because I've got the mobile home there, and I try and any downtime I get, I'd rather be there than
brilliant,
than in the Highlands. And there was a reason for telling you this. Sean Conlon and his sons. I've got to know them quite well because they put on a New Year's Eve or a New Year's Day session where they all come down with their literally everything from trumpets to dulcimers to mandolins and guitars. And I've met Jerry Rickard there. You know, it was Jerry that invited me to it. He said, are you going to be back and bring a guitar because we're going to do this? I mean, the best way of describing this, I don't know whether you're familiar with it, with an album that Dylan did with the band in the late 60s, just before they became big, but it was called the Basement Tapes.
Yeah.
And they just had this mix of instrumentation, and it was kind of a mixture between Dylan and soul and folk and trad and that's what they do. They do this every New Year's Day. I haven't been there for a couple of years, just the way the timing has worked out, having to get back. But I've sat in on those and had 4 or 5 pints of Guinness and played all these Neil Young and tunes with Jerry Rickard and Sean and his sons, all playing trumpets and all manner of things. And they are just the best crowd. I mean, it's one of those ones, you know, the way you look, we're talking about where does 40 years go and where does 30 years go. If I look back, some of the sessions I've played in and with the Conlons and with Jerry have been the most memorable kind of like days I've had, you know. And I would just sit in the background and harmonize and play some rhythm guitar. I'm not looking. I mean, Sean would normally be going, you know, no, you come on, play that, no, play the Thrasher or do whatever, or play some mouth organ. But I always, I'm like, no, I'm a passenger. I'm here to make everyone else sound a little bit kind of, if I can harmonize, I'll harmonize. If I can play a lead thing behind it, then. But it's just such great fun.
Yeah.
It's all born out of St. Mary's. You know, it's all born out of
brilliant.
Kind of like St. Mary's school thing. But and it was Jared that reached out to me. I would pass Sean in Clark's bar in Drogheda every now and then, and he would say, "You should really try and come home for this. I think you'd like it." But yeah, it's great fun.
Fantastic. So where are we now? You're
I'm just out of short trousers at this point. Am I not?
No. So you're spending more time at home with Suze and Ciara.
Yeah. And so I pretty much decided I better, because a lot of 99 to probably 2009, 2010, a lot of it was around the business side of things, raising capital, building products, flying around to people, trying to get them installed on various websites and mobile phones and that type of thing. I kind of stopped and I thought, wait a minute. For want of a better phrase, I kind of felt like I'd been away from the tools for a long time. You know, if somebody had asked me, what is it you do? What's your job? What are you bringing to the party? I wasn't entirely sure at this point, because I'd become like a bit of a jack of all trades. If it needed done, I would go and do it. And so I thought, I better get back to the meat and two veg of the situation here, which is developing technologies and apps and websites and whatever. So I went into Scottish television. They had no tech. They were like a 1960s company that,
Wow.
you know, they've got 5 million viewers here. It's like RTE. So they had all these viewers, but they had very little in the way of like television apps, and their news had a terrible app. And so I kind of went in. There were 3 of us, and we grew that to maybe about 50 over the course of 7 or 8 years. So building the products and then kind of like rolling them out, and then building a team that could build the products. And so I did that I literally went in there, Tony, thinking a couple of years of this, like, get the hang of things. So I can remember what it is I do for a living, and then I'm going to go out and I'm going to look at maybe the music recommendation engine again and see if I can raise some capital for that. But as we said earlier, those 2 years became nearly 10 years without me even kind of like batting an eyelid.
Mm.
And before we knew it, we were into the pandemic, and Ciara's at university doing psychology, and doesn't need me hanging around in the background making sure she's okay. And so I did that, and I came out of there just this year and went into a consultancy firm here called And Digital, and they kind of like work with everybody. You know, they're that type of consultancy firm. But one of the major projects at the moment is with Sky, who obviously do, you know, everything from broadband to TV, etc. So that's where I am right now. I kind of manage a team of about 12 people that are developers or analysts and a couple of graduate students, and manage projects within the consultancy. So we've got kind of an ongoing training program and package for the graduates. We've got 4 of them, and it's a matter of kind of building out products and proofs of concepts and all this type of thing. So yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment. It's really interesting.
And Mike, how do you enjoy the whole man management side of things?
Yeah, do you know, there was a very strange thing that when I joined And they put everyone through what's called, I think it's called a I always nearly say HDMI, which is an interface on a computer. It's HBMD or something like that, but it breaks down. It's a bit like Myers-Briggs kind of, what type of personality are you? You know, you extroverted, feeling, whatever, judgmental or whatever. So I've done several of them over the years, but they had a particular one, and it came out and it said, what was interesting about this, Tony, was the way the questions were they were trying to get an honest answer out of it. It was trying to be like, this is what your ideal kind of situation. because you can game these things if you know it's for an employment situation. You're kind of going, oh yeah, I just love electronic. You know, man, I'm not happy unless I'm up and using Excel spreadsheets. That's just that's how I roll. You know, all that rubbish.
How was your interpersonal skills? Bloody brilliant. Why are you asking?
Yeah. There's a joke, I can't quite remember it, but it was that, wasn't it? Who's fucking asking you? Yeah. But yeah, they've got 4 quadrants, and the 2 quadrants for me were creativity. The 2 spikes were creativity and people, and I was a bit miffed with the idea that I wasn't, you know, a huge logistics guy or a logically programming guy. You know, like everything else, you're always going to look at the ones that you're not naturally aligned to and say, it wasn't that I wasn't aligned to it, because having to do the work that I do, just like you, Tony, it's like you have to do it and you get good at it, or you get reasonable at it. But it's not what you would naturally do. You know, given half a chance, that's not what you get a buzz out of. So the 2 things were creativity and people. And this role at the moment ticks both of those boxes for me, because I get a buzz out of helping other people, I guess, you know, seeing them come on and nurturing them and suggesting things and coaching, for want of a better phrase. But so I get a buzz out of that. In previous roles, I've either been the manager guy, or I've been the product guy, or I've been a mixture of both. This is a little bit more towards the people, but with enough of a product element to it that I feel engaged, because you know, there's the danger you end up being an agony aunt, you know, as a line manager for people. You know, you just listen to them kind of going on about how they should really be running Apple, but nobody's calling them, type of thing. But so yeah, it's a good blend. It's a good blend.
Very good.
And it's not quite as kind of high pressure as the previous 2 things that I've done. So I'm getting enough time to get back and play some music. Kira's now kind of like living with our studenty pals. It allows me the opportunity to write and record with friends whose families have grown up too, you know, and they find themselves in that position going, where's all my mates? Remember, we used to have fun.
Yeah.
Go and have some fun.
I'm not going to keep you much longer, but one of the questions, you know, when you moved over initially, what was the integration like? Like, I've spoken to a good few people, you know, some in Australia, some in the US, and some of them have a tendency to, you know, integrate with the Irish straight away, go to the Irish pubs, and it takes a while before they can merge into the culture of the country they're with. In Scotland, I'd say they're pretty similar to the Irish. So what was your experience there?
So I kind of thought, I seen that as one of your questions, and I thought, but for some reason, I'm not saying I avoided the Irish when I came, but I had no interest in Celtic Football Club. So that immediately kind of puts you in a position of, you know, are you gay? You know, what? So, yeah. So rather than go through all that, most of my friends were all musicians. And most of them had no interest in Celtic Football Club or Rangers Football Club. So in a way, I bypassed that side of it and got immediately involved with a lot of people who were kind of maybe 3rd generation Irish, lots of O'Reillys and Murphys and Kanes and all the rest of it. And so it was like a ready-made community, Tony, I guess, you know, that these people were into their music. They went to the pub, they played gigs, and they didn't talk about what the score was on a Saturday. And, you know, I'm not saying everyone ignored football. There was obviously friends that I had who were crazy about it, and that's what they did. And even on top of that, one of my best pals, Martin Connor, his father, Frank Connor, managed Celtic for a while. So I was pretty close to the inner sanctum at Celtic Park.
Yeah.
But it never transcended into, could you get me some tickets? I'd like to come and see it. Although every now and then I did go when my brother was over once, and I took him, and Enric Larsson scored a hat-trick, and we had the best seats in the house. And my brother's a Man U fan, and he just went, that was the best game of football I think I've ever seen. Enric Larsson at his peak.
Wow.
And I had to pretend I was there every week, you know. I've never been in it before.
Very good. I think we'll call it. It was great seeing you, Mike. And
brilliant to see you, Tony. I mean, it's a bit silly, kind of like you just letting me rabbit for an hour and a half rather than have a.
Are you calling me silly? Are you calling me silly?
I hope you are. Rather than have a chat with you.
Let's not leave it another 40 years.
40 years, yes. Have you got? I'm wondering. Have you got shoes on?
I have. Well, I've slippers on. Anyway, last question. Barry's tea.
Yeah.
A pint of Guinness or Tato crisps. What do you miss the most?
Well, see, I can get the crisps. I am back all the time, right? And I normally stock up on cheese and onion Tato when I'm coming back. As a matter of fact, people tell me to bring it back for them. So it's like some type of contraband trying to get it back into the country. But I drink Guinness. The place I drank in is now not a bad pint at all. But see, when you go home and you just get that pint of Guinness, that first couple of pints, it's just like, you know, I don't know why there's a difference, but there sure as hell is a difference.
Yeah.
It's like a milkshake. And I seen an interview, with Noel Gallagher, and he was talking about various different drugs he's been on over the years, and he says the one thing that he can't kind of consume anymore is Guinness, because he said he's drank 15 pints before he realizes that he's face down on the floor and he's whatever. He says it's just something that's very difficult to maintain the volume on, because it's just such a nice experience, particularly with good company. Hey, speaking of which, the next time I'm back, you need to try and get your arse out. Or if I'm down the West Coast, I'm back down in Limerick. Is that where you're from?
I'm in Limerick for the last 36 years, but my folks are still alive and well.
Oh, good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So
in the same house. Are they up at kind of the Rossnaree?
That's it. Yeah. So I go back there. I'll be back over Christmas. So we can touch base and see if our schedules.
Yeah, well, I'm over from the 28th. No, sorry, the 23rd, 24th. I think the 23rd to the 27th. So if you're in the vicinity, in the locale,
we'll touch base.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Brilliant. I'd love to see you now.
Yeah, well, and I'll just sit there drinking pints of Guinness and let you do the talking for an hour and a half. Find out about you.
I can talk. I can tell you. Mike, it's been a pleasure.
All right, Tony. Lovely to see you too.
Thanks a million. And
all right, dude.
Talk to you later. Ciao.
See you later. Bye.
Bye. Thanks everyone for listening to this week's episode of Irish by the Grace of God. If you like it, please share it with your friends and family, and check out our website, shows.acast.com/Irish by the Grace of God -podcast. Here you'll find all our social media pages to make contact. If you know of any Irish people living abroad with an interesting tale, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you, and tune in next week. Bye bye.